Hi everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Video Chess Training. My name is International Master William Paschall. Today we have a chess lesson where we're going to examine a game that I played online. I think one of the best ways for you to improve as a chess player at any level is to critically go over your own games. The following game was played on the free internet chess site lichess.org. I was playing black and I was live streaming this game. My opponent is completely unknown to me. He's a new player on that chess site. His name was Move11, and he was provisionally rated at 1500, but this is just a starting point, and we have no idea how good this guy is. He could be a complete beginner, he could be a master. So he began with the move knight to f3, and I played my favorite move here, c5. White has the option to transpose to the Sicilian defense with e4. That's what happens here. He could also play the English opening with c4, many other things like the King's Indian attack. He plays e4, the mark of an aggressive player. At this point I continue with my current repertoire, knight to c6, and white plays d4, going into a sharp, open Sicilian. cd, knight takes d4, and g6, I play the accelerated dragon. This variation is characterized by very early fianchetto for black, the bishop g7. And typically, black players using this move order are trying to avoid the sharper opposite wing castling lines of the normal dragon variation of the Sicilian. Knight to c3, bishop g7, and then bishop e3. And this is actually quite a typical order of moves here. And now to keep the game in the accelerated dragon, we have to play knight f6 in this position. If I play d6, it would allow white to transpose to the quote-unquote dragon variation. So knight to f6, and now there are many possibilities. There's the interesting move knight takes knight on c6, but theory has judged this to be okay for black. So most typically white plays the move bishop to c4 in this position. This is the sharpest move, allowing, if black plays d6, allowing white to transpose to the normal lines of the dragon. Black has many different options: castles, queen a5, keeping in the realm of the accelerated dragon. My opponent here, though, instead played the interesting move f3. And it had been a while since I played this line with black, and here I was telling the people that were watching my live chess stream that I thought that I was supposed to play queen b6 later on. But queen b6 here is only black trapping himself. It turns out that queen b6 is quite bad. If we look at this for a minute, queen b6, grandmasters as strong as Yefimenko, the Ukrainian, very strong Ukrainian grandmaster Yefimenko, has actually played this mistakenly. And after knight f5, queen takes b2, knight takes g7 check, king f8, knight a4. It turns out that black does not have a good position. This bishop can come to h6 to guard the knight on g7, and the queen is under attack. It's not clear black will ever even get back his sacrifice material. After queen b4, c3 for example, it's not clear black will even get back the sacrificed piece, as he does in some other similar traps in this line. So this isn't an option, and black doesn't have a really clear refutation per se of white's move order here. The only reputation lies in the game after castles. If white continues here with bishop c4, black can equalize the game. For example, bishop c4, queen b6 now is an equalizer. There's a kind of trap. White plays in this position bishop to b3, which is a normal move. Knight takes e4, threatening to win a pawn for black. But white can maintain only equality with the move knight d5. And this quote-unquote trap simply equalizes the game. Queen a5 check, and now c3. And black, at this point, has to play circumspect knight to c5. And in the game Watson versus Chandler, two English grandmasters reached a level position. After knight takes c6, d takes c6, knight takes e7 check, king h8, knight takes c8, rook takes c8, when white has lost his opening advantage, but seems like he's still okay. So this trap is good enough for black to equalize. If you desperately wanted to win for black, perhaps you have to avoid playing this line and to keep the pieces on the board, because I think it's only good enough for black to equalize after queen b6. Perhaps you'd have to play something instead, like d6 transposing to a normal dragon. Okay, having said all that, the game in question that I played against move 11 was d6 after queen d2. He played queen d2 here, and again I can equalize with this move d5. This is the common idea of the accelerated dragon. I get in the move d5 for black, and white doesn't have really much. He can take on c6, he can do this, or he can castle queenside. But in all lines, it appears that black has equal play because of the early d5. Black actually plays these positions with the move d5 in 2 moves. So we're kind of a tempo up on one of the main lines in the dragon. So black equalizes, at least with no problems, with the move d5 there. But against this particular opponent, an unknown opponent, I didn't want to allow him lines where I simplify a lot, because after d5, white can also continue with something like pawn takes pawn, knight takes, and queen takes, excuse me, not bishop takes d4, queen takes d5. This is the problem. White can simplify by trading tons of pieces here. So I didn't want to allow too much simplification like this against a much lower rated opponent. I wanted to keep the pieces on the board and try to play for a win. But we don't know how strong our opponent is. Could it be a master? Well, it looks that way. Here, d6 is kind of the main move. I played knight takes d4. This is going to transpose to d6 after bishop takes d4, d6, castles queenside, and now bishop e6. And we enter one of the main lines of the normal dragon with white playing castles queenside without bishop c4. The mainline dragon without bishop c4, non-Yugoslav attack. The problem is I don't play the dragon. I've studied some of the lines. I tried to play it a little bit over the years, but I don't play the main lines of the dragon. I'm not that well prepared, and my memory isn't so good for these long variations. Now, white played one of the sharpest lines here, g4. The main theoretical move is king b1, getting the king off the c file, where black often has counterplay. But g4 is a common move, quite okay as well. Queen a5 now, with the plan of bringing my king rook over to the queen side with rook fc8. White continues with the theoretical move a3. I was threatening to play bishop takes pawn on a2. So this move, probably a necessity, and the main line theoretically. Rook on f to c8, and then h4. And now I remembered this much of the theory, that I'm supposed to play rook on a to b8 here, preparing b5. But I told the people watching my stream live as I was playing that I thought that white was supposed to play queen g5 in this position. But my memory did not serve me correctly, because queen g5 has only ever been played in one very obscure game, and it must be a slightly different position, perhaps after king b1, a slightly different position where the move queen g5 is played. So my opponent continued here with the main move regarded by theory h5, and I have to get counterplay, so b5. I'm doing pretty good for someone who doesn't play the main line of the dragon. And now h takes g, and f takes g. I remembered this much as normal. The f takes allows the h file not to be completely open. I have some retreating moves like bishop f7 to help protect my king side. My king can also run away to f7 in some variations. This is not an uncommon, although slightly anti-positional pawn capture. Pawn takes g6, and now g5. And here I hallucinated something. This was a fast-paced game, 5 minutes with a 5-second increment. So I hallucinated here when I was playing the actual game live streaming that I can't play b4 because of knight a2, but obviously he can't play knight a2 because of bishop takes a2. So it was a hallucination on my part, and b4 is probably the best move for black. It's very sharp, but it seems the most dynamic. So b4 looks to give, it really does look to give black the best chance. I think white has to probably take on c3, and in this variation I think black probably has enough compensation for any material he might have to sacrifice. It's more dynamic to play this. Instead I played knight h5, which is like an older move, and here is where we might say, you know, searching for Bobby Fischer, because at this point white played an obscure move, whereas most players play bishop takes g7. There are about 11 games minimum in the database with bishop takes g7, probably more. The question is, should we castle with the knight or with the king? Both have been played, and I was playing in Budapest trying to get my IM title in the late 90s, and I remember there was a Vietnamese player who was very strong named Pham, and Pham played this variation almost exclusively for black, and he played one game with knight takes g7 here, and I would trust his kind of like knowledge theoretically, although things could have changed in the last 10 years. My inclination is to go with king takes, because the knight is a good blockader along the h file. It also has some good squares at g3 and f4. So the jury's kind of out. One computer engine suggested king takes might be better. I don't see the knight playing much of an active role from g7, so I'm not really sure. But here my opponent played a rare move, very aggressive. It's only been played in one other game to my knowledge. This is searching for Bobby Fischer fame. Josh Whiteskin played rook takes h5 in the game Whiteskin versus Jurovsky from the Young Masters, Oakham Young Masters tournament in England in 1992. So it's a very ambitious move and very interesting, but I think it's not quite sound. And this is only the second game, apparently, where this has been played. So our live stream ended up in a very theoretical position. Rook takes h5, g takes h5, bishop takes g7, king takes g7, queen d4 check, and now I made a mistake. It's kind of like, what shall we say, you know, ingrained instinct in my mind to get my king as far away from the opponent's pieces as possible. But here I made a very serious inaccuracy during this game. I played king g8, and king g8 is a serious mistake because my king can actually be quite useful in protecting the e7 pawn. Jurovsky didn't give Whiteskin much time. In the game, Whiteskin and Jurovsky, king f7, and white didn't last too long after this move. Black got very quick counterplay with b4 on the queen side. Knight d5, b4. And Jurovsky wiped Whiteskin out very, very quickly after b4. He had terrific counterplay. It looks to me like it was kind of a prepared variation. But in my line with king g8, I have much less counterplay because my e7 pawn is hanging. So this was the price I pay for not being prepared theoretically. Knight d5. And black has to be very, very careful here. There was some debate when I was streaming this game as to whether I should take the knight on d5. I think it's kind of dangerous to take the knight on d5. The bishop on e6 is a pretty good defender, so I think I just have to live with the knight, and it's difficult to say rook b7 or queen d8. I chose queen d8, and I saw my attack kind of stalled on the queen side, and I'm up material. So my idea here is to try to consolidate, maybe play queen f8, queen g7. Kind of give up on the counterplay on the queen side. And white has a strong attack, and white has full compensation for the sacrifice material here. He plays well f4 with strong counterplay. Queen f8, I think this was okay. The alternative is probably something like rook b7 for black. Queen f8 coming next. f4, queen f8, and now bishop d3. This was a mistake, which is a natural enough move, completing development. But white needs to be very, very timely, and it looks like the best is e5, breaking the structure, forcing some weaknesses. I think after e5, white is better, and he has a significant advantage. Black has to be very careful to survive here after the move e5. But in the actual game, move 11 played bishop d3, which is just a hair slow, and I'm able to consolidate my position. with rook b7. And I'm not sure if I could have potentially taken the knight on d5 at this juncture. It is possible. Rook b7 and now rook g1 and queen g7. Queen g7 allows me to neutralize the position of his queen where it's dominating the whole board. And I think it's a little bit late for e5. I can just take on e5 now at this point. So he tried to retreat his queen. His attack is pretty slow now. I eliminate the knight on d5, and I think black is okay here. After bishop takes d5, e takes d. I'm not claiming I'm winning, but I think I have a reasonable position. But it is a very fast-paced game. b4, and another very serious mistake now. It looks like if white continues at this point attacking with g6, he has to force me to play h6 when he has very strong compensation still. But instead, in time pressure, white played the following move, a4, trying to keep the lines closed, but he misses his chance on the king's side, and after a4, black has a winning advantage. b3, breaking open, and c3, rook takes c3 check is very, very powerful for black. This is my main idea. So white is probably lost now. He tries f5, and then a very key move for me was to make sure my queen doesn't get shut out of play. Queen e5, keeping the queen active in the center of the board, also attacking e5, making sure it doesn't get shut out. And this dragon was a win for black. g6, pawn takes c2, threatening queen takes b2 check. So white has no defense of b2. He plays pawn takes pawn, king h8, and then the only thing he can do to break my attack is to play rook g8 check. And white is lost. He's down the exchange without any real compensation. Rook takes g8, pawn takes g8 queen, king takes, and then a check. This doesn't do much damage. This is the simplest move, queen g7. And white, of course, down the exchange, you don't want to trade pieces. He tries to keep the queen on the board, but a series of checks, and king d2, queen f2 check, I'm able to play to basically try to trade queens. King c1 and queen c5. Now if bishop c4, rook b4 is more than enough for black. So he trades queens, queen takes c5, and d takes c. He gets a pawn, but it's not enough. I still have up the exchange for just one pawn, and all of his pawns are somewhat weak. Rook b4, bishop e8 protecting the pawn, and my king is able to march in on the dark squares to a winning and dominating position on e5 or possibly d4. King c2, king f6, bishop d7, king e5, bishop b6, and then I take the pawn. It was a situation where he cannot defend all three of those pawns on white squares. King b3, and now the winning plan is pretty simple. What I want to try to do is trade off his one remaining pawn on the queen side. Then I can sacrifice an exchange on f5 or d5. We were in some time pressure here in the blitz game, so in the actual game, I never got to conclude my plan. Wasted a few moves, rook h4, rook f4, and white resigned here. I should simply play a4 first. Trade the pawn on a4, then come back and either promote my c pawn or sacrifice for the d pawn on d5. Probably the cleanest way to win. Trade the a pawn, and then sacrifice the rook on d5 when I can reach a winning king and pawn ending. So I thought this was such a fantastic game for my first game in a live stream against an unknown opponent, also playing his first game on a chess site. I think this guy was pretty strong. I mean, he played 16 moves of kind of a main line in the dragon, and then made a slightly uncommon move, sacrificing exchange, like in the game, Whiteskin versus Jurovsky, playing basically perfectly until when he hesitated with, I think, with the move bishop d3. You can't really criticize even White's decision to sacrifice the exchange. It's interesting. But I thought White played almost master level, maybe above master level, just a few inaccuracies in time pressure, and Black was able to take the point. I thought a very interesting practical game. We illustrate some ideas in the Accelerated Dragon. It's a great opening if you want to try to play it for Black. Lots of traps, but you have to be careful not to trap yourself. Like as I talked about on move 7, if we look here back on move 7, Queen b6 is not a good line for Black. And many grandmasters have even made this mistake, like Zakhar Efremenko, and played queen b6. We have to castle first, and if bishop c4 then queen b6 is a strong resource which equalizes, but even then doesn't really leave black with an advantage. So be careful when you play the black side of the accelerated dragon. Many of these traps only lead to equality and may end up just trading pieces. If you want to win with black, you've got to keep some pieces on the board and not allow too much simplification. Thanks for joining me here for video chess training. I'm International Master William Paschall, and please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe here on YouTube to our channel. Bye-bye.